Today we're going to talk about two things that most Americans know about, at least most Americans of my generation, of my age. One is Bigfoot. The other is the famous comedy dialogue, Who's on First? These are both things that I think almost every American knows about, but you may not have heard of them or seen these things. So we're going to talk about those today. We're also going to, as always, answer a few of your questions. Let's get started. Back in the 1970s, when I was growing up, there were lots of programs on TV about strange phenomena, strange things that would happen. These were shows that, as a child, I always found interesting. For example, there would be a television show about UFOs, unidentified flying objects, people from other planets, and there would be television shows about whether they existed or not. One popular topic for these shows was something or someone called Bigfoot, usually spelled as one word, Bigfoot. He is also known by a Native American name, which is Sasquatch, S-A-S-Q-U-A-T-C-H. Bigfoot, or Sasquatch, is part of what we could call American folklore, F-O-L-K-L-O-R-E. Folklore are traditional stories that are told. Your grandfather tells your father, and your father tells you, and so forth. Usually when we talk about folklore, we're talking about things that are either exaggerated or simply not true, things that people have imagined or made up. Part of that folklore includes this thing called Bigfoot. Now, Bigfoot is supposed to be like a big ape, like a big animal. People say he's between 7 and 10 feet tall, which would be up to 3 meters, so very tall. He is covered in dark brown hair, so he looks like a big ape, like an animal that you would find in a jungle. He has a big head with very large eyes. The head sits on his shoulder so that you can't even see a neck. Now, Bigfoot is supposed to live in the northwest part of the United States, out in the middle of the forest. The northwest part is sometimes called the Pacific Northwest. It includes the states of Washington and Oregon, also the Canadian province of British Columbia could be considered part of the Pacific Northwest. Well, Bigfoot is supposed to live there, and there are people who say that they have seen Bigfoot. I remember watching a television show as a child where they actually showed some movies, a film that had Bigfoot in it at a distance. You couldn't see him very well, but there was this tall, ape-like man in the movie. Now, one of the interesting things about folklore stories like this is that many people, knowing that they aren't really true, try to convince other people that it is true. And so associated with Bigfoot have been a number of what we would call hoaxes. Hoaxes. A hoax is when someone does something to make you believe something that isn't true. For example, another common story in American folklore, modern American folklore, is that Elvis is still alive. Elvis Presley didn't actually die. Well, some people try to create photographs on the computer to make it look like, oh, there's Elvis. We even talk about Elvis sightings. A sighting, S-I-G-H-T-I-N-G, is when you see someone. Here in Los Angeles, you can have movie star sightings where you see a famous movie star on the street. Well, people have claimed to have sightings of Bigfoot, including, as I say, this movie that was once shown on television or short film. But these are usually proven to be false. They're proven to be hoaxes. Of course, that doesn't mean that Bigfoot doesn't really exist. However, it would be unusual for an ape to live in a cold, wet area such as the Pacific Northwest, when most apes live in warmer climates, Africa, Asia, or in nearby islands. There is no physical evidence for a Bigfoot-like creature in the U.S. The word creature, C-R-E-A-T-U-R-E, usually is a term to describe an animal. This creature, this animal. But you may want to still believe in Bigfoot if you like. There are similar stories in other countries. In Scotland, for example, there's a famous story of the Loch Ness Monster. This is supposed to be a monster that lives in a large lake in Scotland. And people say that they have seen this monster, this big animal, and have taken pictures of it. So you can believe what you'd like. Maybe we can get Bigfoot to come on the English Cafe and give us an interview, if he speaks English. Our next topic is also very well known to most Americans. It probably is not as common in other countries because it's a series of jokes. It's a dialogue, a comedy dialogue, what we would call a comedy routine, that was made famous in the 1930s and 40s by two famous American comedians, Lou Costello and Bud, B-U-D, Abbott, usually known as Abbott and Costello. Abbott and Costello were a duo, D-U-O. A duo is two people usually working together as part of a comedy team. This duo worked in radio, in film, and in television. And this one routine, this one comedy dialogue that lasts about 5 or 6 minutes, became their most famous comedy routine. So famous that they even went to the White House, to President Roosevelt's house at the time, to perform this. They performed it on radio. They performed this comedy dialogue on television and in the movies. In 1945, there was a movie called The Naughty 90s, and that is one of the many versions of this dialogue. There were actually many different changes made over the years, but the 1945 version is considered the classic, the one that is the best. Who's on first is about two men who are talking about the names of the players on a baseball team. If you are unfamiliar with baseball, you can go back and listen to English Cafe number 50 back in September of 2006 when we explained baseball and the basic rules of baseball. In baseball, the object of the game, the purpose of the game, the goal of the game is for the person to hit the ball and then to go from what we call home base to first base, second base, third base, and then back again to home base. So the person hitting the ball is running around and touching what we call bases, which are small areas that are marked on the baseball playing field. In the comedy routine, these two men are talking about the baseball team and the names of the players on the baseball team. One person, Costello, is asking the questions, trying to find out the names of the people who are playing on the team. When we say playing, we mean who are in the different positions, the name of these players. However, the person answering the questions, Abbott, tries to explain to Costello the last names of these players or the nicknames of these players. A nickname is a short name or an informal name that people call you. So Abbott is explaining the nicknames of the players, and it's very confusing because the nicknames of the players are who, what, I don't know, why, because, tomorrow, today, and I don't give a darn. Those are the nicknames of the players. So on first base, remember there's home base, first base, second base, third base. On first base, the name of the player is who. On second base, the name of the player is what. Just like my name is Jeff. This is very confusing, you can imagine, when Costello begins to ask Abbott questions. Who's on first? And Abbott says, yes. Who is on first? You see, Costello thinks he's asking a question. Who is the person? What is the name of the person on first? And Abbott thinks he's giving the name because the person's nickname is who. So the name of this comedy routine is Who's on First? It's what we would call a play on words in English. The funny part of it is that this confusion continues for 4 or 5 minutes where Costello is trying to get an answer to his questions. Abbott thinks that he's giving him answers to the questions because the questions all are related with who and what and I don't know and the other names of the players. Like a lot of comedy, it goes very quickly. They talk very quickly. So it's sometimes hard to understand. I'll just read the first couple of lines or first part of this dialogue. Costello asks, who's on first? Abbott says, yes. Costello says, I mean the fellow's name. The fellow is the man. What is the fellow's name? And Abbott says, who? Costello thinks he's asking a question and says, the guy on first. Abbott says again, who? Costello, getting frustrated now, says, "The guy playing." Abbott interrupts him to say, "Who is on first?" Costello says, "I'm asking you who is on first." Abbott says, "That's the man's name." Costello says, "That's whose name?" And Abbott says, "Yes." You can see the confusion continues. It's quite funny if you watch it and understand this is the basis, this is the reason for the joke, is this confusion over using these words, who, what, I don't know, as names rather than as question words or statements. So take a look at the video and the transcript and see if you enjoy it. Most Americans have seen it many times, and now with the miracle of YouTube, you can see it too. Now let's take a few minutes to answer your questions. Our first question comes from Alvaro, Alvaro, in Brazil. Alvaro wants to know the meaning of the expression "to tear apart." To tear, T-E-A-R, something apart, A-P-A-R-T, one word, means for someone or something to use a very strong force, to use something to separate two people or two things that are close together or have a good relationship with each other. For example, Dan and Maria were married very happily, but when they had problems with money, it tore them apart. Tore, T-O-R-E, is the past tense of tear. Or you could say, these two lawyers worked together for 10 years, but now their disagreement is tearing them apart. It's separating them. They are no longer close to each other as professionals. You can even use this expression about yourself. You can say, it tears me apart that so many people don't care about the environment. It tears me apart. When you use it that way, it means it troubles me a great deal. Michele, M-I-C-H-E-L-E, from Italy, has a question, two questions. First, about something called Cliff Notes. Cliff Notes is the name of a set of summaries of well-known books published by a company here in the United States. Cliff Notes are summaries and analyses of usually famous works of fiction. So, for example, if you go to the store, they'll have a whole section in a bookstore with Cliff Notes. They're usually yellow and black. You can buy these summaries. Many students will go to the store or now go online and get these summaries so they don't have to do their homework. They don't have to actually read the book. They can just buy the Cliff Notes. So every American student knows what Cliff Notes are. They're these short summaries of great literature that most students use to avoid reading the actual book. I, of course, never used Cliff Notes. And if you believe that, well, you don't know me very well. Michele's second question has to do with the expression to fall out of love. To fall out of love means that two people stop loving each other. The opposite of falling out of love is falling in love. You can say, I saw the beautiful girl walking down the street, and I fell in love. We would call that love at first sight, the first time I saw her. Many songs use this as a theme. The first time ever I saw your face. Of course, I only sing that now to my wife. That's to fall in love or to fall out of love.